Hi, good morning to everyone. I want to thank everyone for coming and, of course, Master Sheng Yen and all the great teachers that have supported the Buddhist teaching from 2,500 years ago. We're all very fortunate to be able to do this. And so I'm going to begin. It's funny when Lydia was talking about me holding a degree. I don't feel like I'm holding anything right now. It's a funny phrase, but I am holding my assistant, right? There he is, Zach, who is here to make sure that I don't fall asleep, right? Wake up. Okay. I am awake. See, I have a dispute between my disciple and me. So he'll come in when it's relevant or, oh, thank you. So here we are. Today we're doing 4 more slogans of Lojong. And actually, I just announced what the slogans are. It's don't malign others, don't wait in ambush, don't make everything so painful, and don't unload on everyone. Don't put an ox's burden on a cow. Oh, that's a nice typo. I couldn't have done this 2,500 years ago. So, and these are my notes up here, and which may or may not be helpful because I'll be skipping around, but it'll give you some clue of what's going on, maybe orient you and maybe disorient you. I'm not sure. So I just want to give a little bit of an introduction to Lojong, which I always do just to get people up to snuff who may be tuning in for the first time. Lojong is the system of 59 slogans that was first created, or the points of it were created in the 11th century by Atisha, and they have grown ever since, and it's common to all Tibetan schools, and many Zen teachers have adopted Lojong as a supplement, something that can help us look at our Chan practice from a different viewpoint and hopefully reinforce what we're doing. So this is not some kind of alternative. This is at least the way that I see it, absolutely in line with our basic teachings. And it's about letting us become aware of compassion, our bodhicitta, first in the absolute way, which is really what our meditation is aimed at first. So we understand the Buddha mind and we learn about the 4 preliminaries, which is that everything is permanent, that we're responsible for our karma, and that life is precious, and that we have no satisfaction ultimately from the samsaric world. That's kind of the first understanding. And then we go through a lot of meditation techniques that mirror what we do in Chan, from Huato to silent illumination. And there is additionally in Lojong this technique called Tonglen, which means giving and receiving, where you can breathe in the suffering of the world or of an individual and breathe out your Buddha nature. And it's very much like metta and some other practices that we do here. And we've gone through, 30 slogans. And I'm not going to, we're in the slogans now that have to do with relationships. And this is really very important. And I want to say something a little bit about the slogans, right? Because slogans, I use this every time, but we're going through the same thing, which is that slogans seem kind of a watered down advertising kind of approach, like things go better than with Coke. That's a slogan. But these slogans, they're called slogans, which I always alert the listener to the fact that the Scottish derivation of slogan is a war cry. So these may sound like simple throwaway phrases, but they are very deep invitations, if you will, to explore our minds on many different levels. There is, of course, the prohibitive or negative, which is don't do something that is harmful. Then there is the affirmative, well, rather than do something that's harmful, we can do something that's helpful and life enhancing to people. Then there is a deeper teaching that the slogans and the world and everything is empty, which is that it's devoid of a self that we think is there, that things are not as we think they are. And finally, there's a karmic level, because we also recognize that our actions affect ourselves and other people. So there are many, many levels that we can go through. And what I thought I would do to begin this is just to tell two stories from the Sufi tradition. These are stories of the Mullah Nasruddin, who is a perhaps historical, but mostly mythical figure, who was a great teacher, a wise sage, and a fool all rolled into one. And the first story I'm going to tell, which is about the Mullah Nasruddin and a poor man and a rich man. I'll go over this when I finish the story, but I'm really highlighting the difference between what goes on in our lives physically, what's going on, whether we like it or don't like it, and the way that we react to things. So it's kind of the absolute and the relative in a very accessible story. So here is the story. There is a rich man in this town in India who is holding a magnificent feast. And of course, he's invited all of his rich friends. And there are innumerable dishes that are being cooked. And the fragrance from these dishes are wafting out into the surrounding area. So there's a very poor man with very little money, who of course would never be invited to this. So he sits like on the edge of the veranda, and he's really enjoying the aroma from the food. It's just wonderful. He's sitting there. He's not eating, of course. Now, the rich man, who might remind us of some people in the news, sees that this man is enjoying something and he's not paying for it, right? So the rich man is outraged. You know, I've put all this money into this food and the time and the effort. So this fragrance that you're smelling, right, you have to pay me for it. So he sues the poor man and takes him to court. So the Mullah Nasruddin is the judge. And Mullah Nasruddin listens to this very carefully. And he agrees with the rich man. And he says to the poor man, yes, you do owe him for this fragrance, for the smells that you've enjoyed. So he asked the poor man to give him his purse, you know, which in that time was a little bag with, you know, just maybe 10 coins, which is all the money he had to his name. And he asked the poor man to pour the coins one by one onto his bench, right? And you hear clink, clink, clink. And the poor man, of course, is like grimacing with the pain of having to part with the little that he has. So the Mullah Nasruddin says, okay, take the coins, put them back in the bag. And he hands the coins back to the poor man. And he says to the rich man, just as he got pleasure from the smells of your food, you are repaid by the sound of his money. Right? So it's a great story. Right? And so what it shows is that there is this level of normality, if you will, of food being cooked and people around. Nothing else is going on. But the greed, right? Greed, hatred, and ignorance are three poisons which are running through all of the Lojong. Those are operative, right? So the rich man, for bizarre reasons, becomes angry and thinks he's losing something. He doesn't realize that he can't hold on to the whole world. But the story lets you go through all of these events and you see what happens. Justice is served in this story in a very strange way. And there's just one other story, which is a great Mullah Nasruddin story of a thief who is burglarizing a home. And as he steps through the windowsill breaks. and the thief really hurts or breaks his leg. And so the thief is very upset, and he takes the homeowner to court, right? Your faulty window is why I broke my leg, so you should pay me. So Mullah Nasruddin goes through all the details of what happened. As it turns out, at some point in the building of the house, the wood that was used to build the window was supplied by someone, by the thief, right? He stole the wood and gave it to someone who gave it to this owner. So the Mullah Nasruddin concludes that the thief really should go ahead with his suit, but he should sue himself, right? Because he's the one who caused the damage. So I think these stories give a little bit of a window into what's going on when I go through the Lojong slogans. And what I'm going to do today, right? Because I do get feedback on these talks sometimes, and sometimes I include a little bit too much information in my enthusiasm. So we're going to do some meditation based on the slogans. But first, I'm going to go through the slogan, give you some idea of how it works, what's involved in it, and then we'll come back to the meditation. So the first one, it's don't malign others. And I have my little note here, compare it to don't try to figure others out, which is number 26. All of these sound a little bit like throwaway sort of phrases of just, just be aware of your own business. Don't look into other people's affairs. But it's really calling our attention to our tendency to not only meddle in other people's business, but to overlook what's going on, and then to see that the stories that we tell ourselves are reality, not the reality that's in front of us. And we, of course, can get into a lot of trouble like that. So Norm Fisher, for one, he's one of, I should introduce the teachers that I'm using, which is Norm Fisher, Pema Chodron, right? Those are two Americans, one from the Zen tradition, one from the Tibetan tradition, and Trala Kyabgon from the Tibetan tradition, and Kentro Lodro Taye also, and Tom Campbell, an American teacher studying both traditions. So I'm using them in everything that I've learned in my 50 years of practice and studying for over 30 years with Master Sheng Yen. So here we are, don't malign others. Norm Fisher gives this story about how his mother told him not to be nasty to other kids in school. And so he went to a new school and he listened to his mother's advice, and people were gossiping and saying all sorts of things about other people, but he kept his mouth shut. And by the end of the semester, he turned out to be pretty popular, because oftentimes when we malign others, when we say nasty things to other people, we're trying to exercise a certain type of mental illusory power, so that I know something about you, I've got something on you. Therefore, I and my wonderful ego will be inflated so that I have some kind of a position from which I can lord it over you, right? That's sort of what's behind maligning others. And Pema, talks about how it's about gossiping, and she gives us a kind of psychological twist to it, that you may react negatively to someone because they remind you of someone else. And this is one of the things we find in the practice, right? That we are often taking our past experience and imposing it on the present. So what we think is happening is only happening in our minds, not in the reality before us. But we get into trouble by listening to our fabrications rather than to the actual situation. And Trala Kyabgon makes the point about looking at our reactivity and also the hurtfulness of criticism, right? And there's a Tibetan phrase where words can cause someone to lose their mind more than a sharp sword. Of course, all of us grown up in America know, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words never hurt me. And you usually say that when you're really being hurt by the words, right? So it's kind of a denial. But this is really looking into the nitty gritty of it. So we can use the old method of counting to 10 and being aware of the gap that is in our minds between what we hear and how we act. And this is part of what our meditation can do for us, right? We can see the mind in the process of reacting, and we can work on that to get to the process of responding wisely from wisdom states. And so we have a quote from the 37 Practices of Bodhisattvas. Harsh words disturb the mind of others and cause deterioration in a bodhisattva's conduct. That's all of us here, all bodhisattvas, right? Therefore, give up harsh words which are unpleasant to others. This is the practice of the bodhisattvas. And Cantrell talks about not retaliating, and to really examining your heart to see what's going on, and to once again, instead of maligning others, you can praise others. You can be supportive of other people. You can recognize the power of words, the power of being supportive. So now, what I'd like to do is I'm going to do a meditation with everyone, and it has 3 parts, and it's centered around this particular slogan of not maligning others. So I'd like everyone to sit quietly, sit comfortably, just letting your body relax. Make sure your body is here or there, wherever you happen to be. And also just let your mind empty as easily as it may of the things that you might be preoccupied with. If there are things before here, this time, or things that are imminent, you can let them go for the moment. And we're going to work on this slogan, this idea of maligning others. So now search your memory. This is a different kind of meditation. Could be yesterday, right? Could be last week, could be this morning, of where in your mind you had malevolent thoughts towards someone. This can be the news, right? This can be what's going on in the news, where you have somebody who is really making you respond negatively in a hurtful way. You're not saying anything. You may have said something, but just bring that up, that event, and see how it is percolating in your mind now that you're aware of it, right? So when we become aware of things, they lose their sting, right? You're not in the situation. You're very much in your body and and the clarity of mind. And then just working on that thought for a moment or two. This is see if you can then understand the way that your mind is reacting to this thought, this memory that's in your mind, and see if you can bring about the kind of presence of mind where you're aware of these things arising in your mind as they arise in your mind before they start to churn up and start to become more malevolent. Right? And you may think that this is not about suppressing yourself necessarily. It's not denying your actionable ability to call out injustice or something like this. This is really just about what's going on in your mind. And also consider the habitual nature of this, right? When these things come up in your mind, they really just pop up very naturally. But looking at them in your mind now, you can see the causes and conditions that arose concomitantly at the same time with these kind of malevolent thoughts. So that a lot of things had to come together for something to arise in your mind, and then for you to grab onto it with feelings of aversion. It came in, somebody said something to me, it could be a long time ago, and now I'm grabbing onto it. And I'm offended. Right? I feel that negativity in me. And now I can look at it because there's no place for me to put it, because I'm in this meditative state. I'm just seeing how the mind reacts. Just work with that for a moment or two. Okay, so now we've been working with negative intention. Now we're going to work a little bit with wholesome intention. Imagine what your mind would be like if you didn't malign others. I mean, imagine if you, not that you have to let people walk all over you or anything like that, but if you were really clear about how your mind is reacting at any given moment, and you were honest enough to see how certain things keep arising in your mind. One of the great benefits of working with these slogans is that you can see patterns arising in your mind where you might not be aware of how similar your reactivity is in certain things. It could be you hear rock music and then you start dancing, or you hear rock music and you hold your nose. Same thing with opera or any other kind of music. And that's just music. That's not actually people doing anything one way or another. But we have very reactive minds, and this is to see that, and then just see, is that always true? Does that have to be? That's the question. It's a really interesting question, right? We're so used to reacting the way that we react, and of course we're all hidden behind the facade of our minds, right? There's this quote from Hamlet of a man can smile and still be a villain. Hamlet's talking about Claudius, the king who murdered his father. So it's a real villain. But just, we're really looking at our own reactivity. And what if also, by extension, what if nobody was maligning anybody? I mean, I know it's not necessarily realistic, but it's not a bad thought. And just consider that for another moment. Just think about the responsibility that we have with our own minds, and not only the responsibility, really consider the capability. Really important. We don't have to be slaves to our thoughts, to our own minds. We have freedom in every moment if we can look for it. Otherwise, we're just reacting like a jumping bean, pushed, and then it just flips over and flips over without any forethought. Okay, so that is the first slogan of don't malign others. Very, once again, when you really look into the mechanics of it, it's not just, you know, cross at the green, not in between, some kind of very isolated slogan that is only operative in certain situations. I mean, that's another, as I think about this thing, another kind of really interesting aspect of it. This reactivity that we have in certain ways is with us because we are, I'm speaking for myself, ordinary sentient beings. We have long histories of difficulty. We have dramatized things and we have traumatized things in our lives. So there's an undercurrent of our greed, hatred, and ignorance, which is triggered in many cases by certain events. And just before I continue, I want to go through the karmic cycle of how this works, because I'm hoping this will be helpful about how we take things into the mind and react to them. So one of the first things, there are four stages. The first thing is imprinting. When we hear something, especially if it's an insult, you idiot, or something like that, take that into your mind. Now, especially if you have poor self-image, if you have been abused or whatever, that kind of a phrase will hurt you more, and that lodges in the mind. And other things, other causes and conditions will come up, and that's called the ripening of what's in the mind. And then events happen in your life which are triggering. So, someone insults you, or you see someone who you think is weaker or more vulnerable than you. And this is a great opportunity for you to say something negative. And so that triggers you, and it outwells. So then you take this this thought, this image, this incident, this event, whatever it is, and then you bring it out into the world and you malign others. So it's really quite wonderful in our practice that we can be aware of how our minds work. I just think this stuff is really quite wonderful. Okay. So, all right, no maligning. At least right now. So we don't have an opportunity if we're sitting here and listening. So we're good for the next few minutes of not maligning anyone. Okay, now we go to number 32, which is coming up. Right, here we go. Don't wait in ambush. This slogan is one that sometimes when I talk to people about Lojong, it's the first one I bring to bear, that I express, because I think it is so relatable to. Now, normally the way I characterize it when I talk about it is that you have some view about somebody or something, and you really hold on to it for whatever reason. And it's, we talk about our petty peeves, the bugaboos. I know there are a lot of words for this, things that really annoy us. It could be, just think about dealing with the internet and your browser or something like that, where you really have anger at, it could be Google, it could be Microsoft, and of course it could be some person somewhere, right? And so this is festering in your mind, let's say on a low level, right? It's been imprinted, it's ripening, and somebody just says something and you have your opportunity. And in this case, the difference between maligning someone and this is that you really have kind of a nameable, identifiable position that you want to impart or impose on someone else. Pema has a very good example of this, of like a couple spouse where the wife, let's say, has some information on the husband, which she knows, but she knows that he doesn't know that she knows. So this is her secret, right? And then they get into some argument, right? Some really argument. And then she lets him have it. I know that you lost $1,000 betting on the horses, right? You didn't think I knew that, did you? Right? So I got you. Right. So that's waiting in ambush. And the larger understanding of waiting in ambush is don't hold a grudge. And this is a remarkable thing to really look into, because obviously I'm not interviewing you all now. I don't know how you're reacting to this, but there are a lot of people who would sort of say, well, I don't hold grudges. I mean, this slogan really doesn't really affect me. Of course, there was that guy who borrowed money from me about 10 years ago and hasn't given it back. But I don't hold grudges, right? It's not a problem, right? So one of the things that the slogans can really elicit from us is a recognition of our inherent denial. If you happen to have listened to the last talk I gave, number 30, right, of the slogans is don't be so predictable. And the subtext of that one is don't be trustworthy. And that is what? Be trustworthy? That doesn't sound like a bodhisattva, right? That sounds pretty sneaky. But what it's talking about is being consistent in a harmful way, that you always react to things in a particular way and you're not recognizing it. You're very very happy to let's say clean your room or clean someone else's room, but then there's taxes, right? And you don't want to have anything to do with it. And you say to yourself, well, look, I'm doing all this stuff. It's much more onerous than that. That just doesn't count. So you do this interesting accounting, no pun intended, with taxes, but you don't really see it. Right. All right. So meditation number 2. As we're sitting here taking in, and one of the reasons I'm doing this, by the way, and this is, once again, this is a criticism of me. I recognize how I personally am filled with all these buzzwords and I can explain things, but that doesn't mean that I have them in my heart. So when we look at these a little bit more deeply, rather than sort of saying, oh yeah, that's really a good idea, that sounds very good, I do this all the time, and then it goes in one ear and out some other part. I mean, it just gets lost in the sauce. So once again, sitting comfortably and quietly, having a clear mind. See if there are any grudges in your mind now. Could be an ongoing grudge. This is often, unfortunately, the case of somebody who has ghosted you, right? You extended the hand of friendship and it was just left dangling in the air. Or someone who betrayed you in some ways, either somewhat reasonably or totally malevolently, for no possible understanding of reason. And see how that comes up and percolates in the mind. It's the first phase. Okay, and now look at the causes and conditions that have caused this to arise. I mean, you had to have lived in a certain place at a certain time. I know this is going to sound sort of crazy, but you both, whoever this might have happened with, you both speak the same language. Right? If somebody insulted you in a language that you don't understand, you probably wouldn't notice, right? So you had to have that facility. Other factors might have been in play where you might have been in a time of your life where you seemed more vulnerable, more needy. And just at that time, this event happened. So it strikes a chord, a dissonant chord in you. So you can look at that, and just by looking at all of these causes and conditions, you can then see how it's you who has the potential to take responsibility, to see how you're taking all the little pieces of this puzzle and making it into one big grudge. And you can ask yourself, how is it that this grudge persists after 12 hours, 12 years, several decades? Yes, something might have been taken from you at a certain point, might have been harmed, but this is right now. Hopefully, at least that particular stimulus is not operative, and you're just sitting. And lastly, you can then contemplate this question, could I be grudge-free? What would that mean? What would a world be like without grudges? And, you may feel that what comes up is like, no, wait a second, I cannot give that up. That person really hurt me. That's unforgivable. And if you recognize that this holding on to the grudge is actually causing you pain, then perhaps you can look at it differently and be gentle with yourself. The purpose of this exercise is not to place unreasonable demands, and we'll get to that in another slogan. It's to recognize that you can chip away at things in your mind. Things don't have to be the way that they have been, because every moment is a new, fresh moment. You can bring the past with you, but you don't have to. You don't always have to. And if you do, right, we give ourselves a break. It's not like we're perfect. Then you can look at how you're holding on to things. The less of an agenda that you hold yourself to with these things, of I'm trying to hold on, now I'm trying not to hold on. Each one of those has its own pitfalls, if you will. So you can examine that. And as I often say with these slogans, I think these are available to anyone. I mean, just you can work with them the way that you work with a huatou. You can pick one that really resonates with you, right? So anyone, there are 59 of these, and if you speak to 59 people, you'll get to 59 different kind of reactions. Where you think you are in your practice, what you think you particularly need. You can look at the ones that seem attractive, or it's a funny word about a slogan, but seem like they might be of benefit. And you can look at the ones that you don't really like, and then you might sort of ask why that happens. And so there are many ways of working with these. I'm going through every one of them as a kind of it's like I'm a real estate agent. I'm a Dharma real estate agent. showing you different slogan houses that you can check and see if you want to live there, right? This one has 2 bedrooms. This one has a bathroom. This one doesn't even have a floor. You'll be very, very uncomfortable if you take one step into this particular place and you'll fall 10 floors. So you're really looking at these things, right? You don't want to just accept it because I'm giving you a big smile and I'm this high-powered real estate agent. You really examine things for your own benefit. Anyway, so that's my my slogan. And your slogan is always be striped. That's not one of the 59. It should be. See, this is how we take our particular situation and we graft it to our own purposes. Okay, that was enough. Thank you. Wow. Okay. So now let's go to number 33. One thing I should say about the don't wait in ambush. Kentrel, Trabgon Rinpoche lets us know that comes from a Tibetan phrase that actually talks about a narrow passage in a mountain where people actually do wait in ambush. I mean, this is sort of a metaphor that comes from brigands and robbers, right, who are waiting in ambush. And as he and others point out, that there's really an element of cowardice in this, that rather than being upfront and open and expressing what your take on a situation is in a wholesome way, you're too scared to do it. So it's like you're throwing spitballs from a balcony where no one can get you. That's kind of the image of don't wait in ambush. Now, don't make things so painful. This one is, once again, these phrases, since I've been studying for a while, are really, really profound, right? Even though, as I say, they seem like throwaways. The one thing is, Tom mentions, this comes right out of the Pali Canon, if you will, with the famous sutta that talks about 2 arrows that we as ordinary sentient beings incur. Not that we have to, but we often do. The first is like you are shot with an arrow. Ouch. I hope that was a good imitation of getting shot with an arrow. Anyway, all right. Ow. All right. This really hurt. But then what's the aftershock? The aftershock of getting hit with the arrow is, ow, this really hurts. It's painful. Oh, now I have to shoot back. This shouldn't have happened. If I had been more careful, this wouldn't have happened. What if it's a poisonous arrow? What do I do? Who do I call? So all of the mental distress, and this is about an arrow, which is a pretty serious kind of thing to happen, but it could just be an insult or something like that, is this look back, so to speak, that we have in adding something that is added from our reactivity, not from the situation. Whatever happened, happened. It's like if we talk about this cup that I'm holding, whatever anyone says about it, the cup remains the cup. I mean, it does what cups do. It holds liquid and it will disintegrate, but it is just exactly what it is. And we're often not like that. That's why we're prey sometimes to advertising. I remember seeing a beer commercial where a guy in a marketing company said that just by putting some gold foil around the neck of a beer bottle, you can charge like 25% more. People will assume that it's a high-class beverage just because of the wrapping, right? So all of that stuff is the painfulness about not really dealing with things as they are. And the Zen phrase for that, which Norm has over here, is don't put a head on top of your head. I found that very confusing. when I first heard it, I tried to picture it, but it really means that you're adding something to a situation that doesn't necessitate the inclusion of something that is not there except from your own mind. So don't put another head on your head. And so you don't make a bad situation worse. And recognize how you're reacting to someone. If there's someone in the office who you think is really screwed up or is having a problem or whatever, rather than be helpful, you start to hone in on a particular person. And this happens with bullying in schools. And you're taking a situation that might have had some problems with it and you're making it worse. And it's like going to the dentist. I actually know someone whose wife was absolutely paranoid about going to the dentist, so she never went. So she lost all of her teeth, and that affected her jaw and a lot of other things. And it's, if you could just include it into the way your life works, and there's certain things that you do, whether you like them or not, then you can overcome it. And what this slogan does is don't make things so painful, is if you keep this in your mind and you're going about your everyday life and someone asks you to get a chair or make some coffee, and all of a sudden you find yourself grumbling about it. Why do I have to do? Why can't they make their own coffee? I mean, really, whatever's going on, you can see that the dissonance will arise in your mind. And that is very instructive, because once again, what the slogans are helping us to do is to see things that we haven't seen before. And there's a negative and a positive side to that. I'm writing a book now on the Lotus Sutra, and in the Lotus Sutra, there are many times where the great bodhisattvas are hearing a teaching, and the phrase in the Lotus Sutra is they're overjoyed. They got something that they never had before, which of course the Lotus Sutra sort of says is they've always had it, they just didn't know it. But now you can have some if not joy, a sense of contentment of like recognizing that something is, there's something you're reacting to that you just didn't know about. And all of a sudden you're reacting to it. Another example of this is in a former life when I was working, I'm retired now, I was a headhunter and I had to interview people all the time. And I would point out things in their comportment, the way that they behaved, that were totally unconscious. Sometimes I would have somebody who would be talking to me about their job. And of course, people who are leaving their job are often upset. And every time they would say something, they would slam the arms of their chair. Every time. I mean, it was really kind of annoying. So I would point that out to them, and they would go, they'd look at their hands like, whose hand is that hitting the chair? They just hadn't seen it. By the same token, I had someone who ended every sentence that he said with, And I said to him, are you aware that you end every sentence that you say with, And he said, I do not, And all of a sudden he said, oh, I just said, and he just had been totally unaware of it. So all of that, it may be painful, it may not be so painful, but once again, it's like Shunro Suzuki says that our Chan, our Zen practice, is about noting when we're adding a little bit extra. And this is what it actually means, I think, in the poem Faith in Mind, when it says the great way is not difficult if only you do not pick and choose. And then it says, if you're off by a hair, then you're as far apart as heaven from earth. And what it means is, in my interpretation, is that when you do add these sort of things, when you're not seeing what your mind is actually doing, then you're caught up in your own mind. You're in another world. You really are. You're not in the situation. So you really are. You're neither on heaven nor earth. You're floating in your delusional mind or illusory mind. And let's see how we're doing for time. I'll do a meditation on the last one just so we have some more time. Let's see. Well, no, actually, I think this is really, I changed my mind. Let's try this now. Once again, quieting the mind. This whole thing, don't put a head on top of your head, or if you like, don't make everything so painful. Just really bring in some recollection of your recent life and see if anything comes up. Some of the tasks, it's like it could be a little bitty spark in your mind of something that was just annoying you. Just, there was piece of furniture you were going to move, but you just haven't moved it, or something someone said to you, whatever it is, and you've been avoiding it. Or when you do something, rather than doing it with patience, you're just grinning and bearing it. And is that really a valid way of approaching? You can just contemplate for a moment. And note once again the causes and conditions, the reactivity of the mind as this comes into the mind. And if you can see the reactivity or the tendency to begin reacting. Sometimes these things come in the mind almost like clouds are entering the mind, different parts of it. It's hard to see, but then a storm could emerge from the gathering clouds, and it doesn't always have to. And then finally, the affirmative part of this slogan is imagine if you lived in such a way that you actually did what was in front of you, right? And also, this is not to put some stricture. Like if you happen to be someone who procrastinates a lot, that seems to be what you're doing. See if you can procrastinate well. Just we're trying not to cause ourselves more difficulty with these slogans. Right? They're kind of heads up. They're guidelines of a sort, but when we see the empty nature of them, they're just things that are we can use in our everyday life and make life simpler. Right? That's the nature of this slogan. Don't make things more complex than they have to be. Sit with that thought for a moment. Okay. And now we will go to the last slogan we're going to do. That was, let's see, go over this. This is Norm Fisher translates it as "don't unload on everyone," and the original is "don't put an ox's load on a cow," right? And this is, Zag always likes to show the inherent nature of this. Is the notice the upside down view, right? So this is basically his situation where he's seeing the world in an entirely topsy-turvy way. Thank you for your service. Okay. That's our next segue into this slogan. So the Tibetans point out the nature of Tibetan culture, about how important oxen are. And even one, I think it's Kentrol, who says that the female oxen are more powerful and are prized more. And this is really a big deal in a rural community where you depend on these animals. But the idea is you understand how they work. So oxen are creatures that are very strong. They can travel great distances and they can climb mountains, right? And they can pull carts, so they can help you move goods. But they can't just carry goods on their backs. It'll just fall off. So you couldn't just pile some packages on an ox's back and expect that they would get more than 10 feet. So you really have to understand what they can do and what they can't do. Now, cows are much more passive animals, and they don't travel very much. They'll go from one pasture to another, but I don't think you could easily get a cow to climb over a mountain. And also, I don't think they're ever really used to carry someone. I don't think people ride cows, and they don't ride bulls, except in the rodeo, right? That's when people ride bulls. And they don't ride them very long, right? If you stay on a bull for, what is it, 10 seconds or something, that's, you get some points if you happen to be in a rodeo, which I have never been, by the way. So the other thing that this whole issue of cows and oxen brings up is not only the past and not only living in the moment, right? So once again, it's kind of our understanding as Zen practitioners and people in the mindfulness movement are always talking about being in the present moment, right? And that it seems to be that's what I'm talking about. But that doesn't mean that the past and the future aren't operative in a certain way in terms of our consciousness, right? We do have pasts, at least in our minds, and we do have futures, at least in our minds, and we do have to plan for them, right? So we have to understand, are we going to pick an ox or are we going to pick a cow eventually? So if you have a situation where, this translates to the human world, of course, where you're often foisting off certain things that you have to do on someone, maybe because you have a friend in the office, as one of the, as Pema mentioned, who you were friendly with, so you don't want to trouble them. You trouble somebody else who's really not that capable. So your consideration of being friendly and being helpful blinds you to the overall project that you're trying to do. You're not giving it to the right person for whatever reason. This also happens where you're giving it to the wrong person deliberately because you want them to fail. And I used to work in IT and corporations, and I would see this happen. I would see senior managers initiate a project that they knew would fail. And they figured once the dust clears from that, then their power would increase. They would be in a much better position administratively, organizationally than they had been. And what this slogan is asking you to do is to be aware, and all of these slogans are really about relationships, for you to be aware of how you are interacting with someone and what kind of responsibility you are either withholding from them, where there's somebody who really is an ox in a good sense. They're really very capable, but you're withholding because maybe you're afraid that they're really very good and that they're going to succeed, and you don't want that to happen because you feel threatened. These things happen also. Or once again, you're giving it, for other reasons. You're just not assessing the situation properly. And this is also to be understood in a very fluid sense. It's not like this is a system of labeling people. You're not walking down the street, okay, there's a cow person and there's an ox person. There's 2 cows over there and there's ox people over there. I don't know how you would figure that out, but that's not the idea. The idea is that these roles change according to the situation, and that sometimes we are looking at ourselves as either an ox or a cow. That you can let that float through all the slogans we've talked about today, right? That I have this image of myself as either a superior person, capable, and because of this investment in this kind of illusory view of myself, I'm going to be overlooking a real situation in front of me, and then that could be ending in damage or failure. Or once again, I think of myself as a loser, and there's something that I really could do, and there's really something that I could do to help the situation, but I hold back because of this negative view of myself. And that's also not terribly helpful. And then I think I had at the end of this, I just thought this is something, there it is. This is when I was in IT, this was posted on a wall a lot. The 6 phases of a project: enthusiasm, number 1, disillusionment, number 2, panic, number 3, number 4, a search for the guilty, and number 5, punishment of the innocent, and number 6, praise and honors for the non-participants. It's very cynical, but it is possible for these things to evolve and emerge given one's misapplication, misunderstanding of a situation according to the things that you're holding on in the mind. So let's just finish this one with another quick meditation, if you will, where you're just in the clarity of your mind, sitting comfortably, letting some situation. Now, in this particular one, think of a person that you either admire or a person that is giving you a lot of trouble. Just see what floats into your mind and examine the nature of your expectations and your disappointments with the person, that you're holding on to this. And what's interesting about this particular slogan is it's about actually acting in the moment. All of them have that aspect to it, but this is really about how are you going to proceed with a particular task that you have right now. Are you going to assess it? Are you going to delegate or follow orders or whatever is necessary for the thing to reach a happy fruition? Or are you going to screw things up? Okay, so just bring that kind of situation into your mind. And if you have something like this in your mind, look again at the causes and conditions. What kind of values, what kind of experiences or memories or wishes and aspirations are you bringing to your relationship that is perhaps making you characterize someone in one way or another, ox or cow. And then finally, with a clear mind, you can imagine, what if you lived in a world and you were part of the world where you weren't making these kind of imbalanced judgments. You were really clear on what you're doing, and you were not burdening other people with unreasonable demands, and you were clear about what you're capable of. So you could pick and choose in a wise, discriminating way, not in a way that you're unaware of. Okay, so I just want to um, review what I've gone over today. Besides the story of the Molinas Rudin and um, the story where the rich man was recompensed with the sound of the poor man's money. The poor man received the aroma of the rich man's banquet, and show how the mind of the rich man especially was grasping onto things that were created only in his mind, and how we don't have to do that. And also I told the story of the thief who was hoisted with his own petard, is the statement. He was really responsible for his own injury, right? Which is often what happens when we're engaged in unwholesome behavior. And then I spoke about number 31, don't malign others. Show the wisdom of looking into what we come up with and what we hold on to. Look clearly in that and all the aspects of it. And then don't wait in ambush. That's about grudges and how we can hold on to things from ages ago, and we let them grow in our minds if we're not capable. And this lets us have a window to see where the actual unwholesome behavior might actually emerge, and we might be able to stop that. And then number 33 is don't make everything so painful. That's putting another head on your own head. Just telling a story about a situation and then believing in and working off this story, your own fabrication. And then last week, we just did don't put an ox's burden on a cow, to have a wise way of discerning what people's capabilities are, your capabilities are, and how to most propitiously and effectively go about our lives and do what we have to do. And right, did you catch everything? I didn't hear a word. So this is really a great John student. See that? No. What? Not a bone, right? Anything? Yeah, no. Are you relaxed? Um, yeah, nothing. Look at that. Look at that. Total relaxation. Just don't try this at home. Okay. Thank you for your service. Okay. So there we are. Thank you all for coming and listening. This was, I had a lot of fun. I hope you did. And please, any questions? I'm open. Thank you.
Uh, Thank you, Harry, for your talk. And we still have some time. So if anyone here in the audience has any questions, just raise your hand and I'll bring the mic over to you. And anyone on Zoom who has any questions, just raise your virtual hand and we'll unmute you. Thank you.
Yeah.
So we have a participant on Zoom who has a question. So Miranda, if you want to ask your question, you're unmuted.
Thank you very much, Chan Meditation Center for New York, for inviting Harry Miller and Zach to have this wonderful talk. I'm all the way out at the West Coast, and I'm so glad that I am here to listen to the wisdom of Harry Miller. Thank you very much. I do have a question with regards to somebody I have hatred for. And I usually don't have hatred until this past few years. And I'm trying to find wisdom and learn wisdom and use all the Dharma wisdom that I've learned from Dharma Drum and Harry on how to remove this annoying thought of this person. And what I'm trying to do is the concept of oxen and cow. How would that relate? Or how could I use that to overcome this hatred and annoying person kind of thought?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Nice to hear from you, Miranda. I'm coming all the way from the West Coast. So it's a good question. I mean, one thing that one of my teachers has shown me is that you can take any slogan, any of the 59, and apply it to any situation. It takes a certain cleverness to do that, but they're all applicable. So in this particular case, you may feel like you're the cow in this. So someone is oppressing you or has oppressed you, and they didn't size you up. And I think there's a deeper understanding in the cow-ox dichotomy, if you will, to remove the dichotomy part of it and just see if you can see somebody as they are, without your expectations or your disappointments about them, and recognize that whatever caused them to act in the way they did was itself the result of many causes and conditions. And, you know, as they always say, if somebody hits you with a stick, you don't blame the stick, right? We really intuit when someone seems to be so hateful, or we hate them or whatever, that they have done this willfully and malevolently, like they wake up every morning and the first thought in their mind is you, or they could be your first thought. And that's not really exactly true. That's not really the way that it works. The other thing that you have to, well, you don't have to, but one thing you might consider is that when you are in this state, or when you are dealing with what you are dealing with, you personally are at this moment suffering. And we are trying to alleviate suffering. And so you might not kind of see that because you're so caught up in the particulars of exactly what happened. I know in my particular situation where some of my friendships have dissolved, and for a long time afterwards, I would just keep regurgitating all of the things that happened and keep building a case in a courtroom that doesn't exist except in my mind about why this person was so horrible and so terrible and how terrible the whole thing is. All the while, not necessarily realizing how this exercise, for lack of a better word, was causing me to suffer. So that's one thing. Recognize the suffering of it is really of your own doing. It's not to deny the reality of whatever happened, but it's to recognize the moment to moment of this moment that's happening and what that's causing in terms of suffering. The second one, which is very important and very elusive, is to somehow look at the very, very natural wish that you don't suffer, that these hateful thoughts go away. So what you're doing unconsciously, and I'm saying what I do unconsciously when these things happen, is I'm getting down on myself for having these thoughts. Well, I am such a wonderful practitioner. I shouldn't have hateful thoughts towards anyone else. This is really bad. This is really bad. So this is like, Zhuangzi talks about this. It's like the double injury. When he's in the state of Zhou, no, it's the Duke of Zhou who's in the state of Li, let's say. And Zhuangzi asks him, what's the matter? And the Duke of Zhou says, well, I wish I was in the state of Zhou. I'm in the state of Li now. And Zhuangzi says, well, either go back to Zhou or stop worrying about it. Otherwise, you're doing the double injury. So this is a really powerful thing. It's like, it's unpleasant to have these thoughts. I mean, really recognize it. And also the wish for the thoughts to go away on many levels, right? Because it's unpleasant, if a hammer falls on your foot, you really wish the pain would go away. That's quite natural. But then you have the added thing, of like putting a head on your head, so to speak, of having some idea that I'm a good person, I'm a practitioner, and I'm beset with these really negative thoughts. This shouldn't be happening. So I am in dereliction of my duty as a wonderful bodhisattva. So that's adding more. It's adding insult to injury, I think. So you just be gentle with yourself and see what actually is possible in the situation. Yeah, I've been through a lot, so I know. The other thing is the wish that the whole thing didn't happen. I think this is a really strong possibility. Oh, if I only hadn't done this, and if they only had said this, and if this hadn't arisen, and if that hadn't arisen, this whole situation wouldn't have blown up. So please, Buddha, Guanyin, make it happen, not happen by going back into the past and changing reality. And that's not going to happen. So the one thing I could say, Miranda, is really look, like I've been talking about in these exercises, look at the causes and conditions and the assumptions that you are making that enable the kind of pain that you're feeling. And maybe you can work with that. So thank you for the question.
Well, thank you very much. I can totally agree with what you said. And oh gosh, I practice as if like I am you, but definitely not as wise as you and Zach. And I shall continue to practice now that with better clarification. Thank you very much.
Yeah, and Zach, by the way, do you have any enemies? No. Love everybody. See that? That's the attitude. You have to have stripes, by the way.
Love you, Zach. Thank you.
Okay.
Amitofo.
Amitofo.